This podcast was recorded on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. Hello everyone, welcome to the Nature Disturbed podcast, a podcast about the good, the offensive, and the confusing parts of the animal kingdom, a kingdom which includes the reindeer, Gwyneth Paltrow, and slugs. There might be as many as 10 million animal species on Earth, most of which remain unnamed by science. Well, that's okay. We can just name them now. Let's call them all Rachel. There. Done. Named them. Now that scientists don't have to worry about doing that, they can focus on the real problems, like, finally, genetically engineering flying, talking capybaras. No offence, scientists, but it's 2026. We're waiting. We're continuing today with the Wet and Wild series, an exploration of the interactions between life and water. After journeying in previous episodes to such ambient destinations as the Great Barrier Reef and the steamy Magdalena River of Colombia, today we're heading to our first frozen environment. So, as ever, I'm sat here in my kitchen sink. I've filled the sink with cold water and ice cubes, and I'm wearing ski goggles and a ski suit, although it's not keeping me warm because the water's got inside, but that's okay. Before we plunge into today's topic, I'd like to say thanks for tuning in to listen. I'm so enjoying having you, the listener, coming along on these journeys with me, and I think you're doing a great job. I do hope you're enjoying my hosting of the show. I'm enjoying hosting, and I'm looking to do more of it. In fact, I've applied for a job as the host on the Kelly Clarkson show. They aren't currently accepting applications, but I figured there's no harm in trying. This episode is about an animal which does exactly what it says on the tin. The snapping turtle. Snap, snap. In honour of today's subject, I'm going to be giving myself snaps every time I make a smart comment or have a good idea. And come to think of it, that in itself was a great idea. Snaps for me. The snapping turtle is an animal which falls into one of my favourite categories. Animals which look like living fossils. Prehistoric beasts which have somehow slipped through the cracks of time. Some of them prowl through ancient forests in the world's last fragments of untouched land. Some carve their way through the mud on the ocean floor 10,000 metres down. And others lie dormant in the still lakes of the frozen north, waiting silently beneath the icy surface for something to rouse them from their motionless state. It might surprise you to hear that last description applies to the snapping turtle. Known more commonly as a resident of Florida's Everglades, this predatory reptile has the aesthetic of a swamp creature. A turtle with a weight of nearly 100 kilos, a wandering garden overgrown with a thick mat of algae, its carapace beset with great spikes, and a hooked beak, giving it the ability to take off a human finger with ease. Indeed, this giant reptile is more than comfortable in the humid southeastern region of the United States, where it is a familiar part of the local environment. But the range of the snapping turtle stretches all the way from the moist southern tip of the continent to Canada. Now, this begs many questions, not least, how many Celine Dion references will I be able to shoehorn into today's episode? That's a great idea. I'll give myself 2 snaps. It also begs the question, how on earth, please, is a quote-unquote cold-blooded reptile, like a turtle, living as far north as Canada? What's it doing there? Does it want us to send help? 7 great questions. Was that 7? I'm not sure. I'm not a mathematician. But what I do know for certain is that I went to Canada on a fact-finding mission for the sake of the entire human race, because people have to know. Before I hand you back, here's a quote to contextualise today's topic. Because the snapping turtle is one of the world's most northerly turtles, living at very high latitudes, this quote from Dr. Seuss's Yertle the Turtle has a fun reading. "You hush up your mouth, howled the mighty King Yertle. You've no right to talk to the world's highest turtle. I rule from the clouds, over land, over sea. There's nothing, no nothing, that's higher than me. So now I shall hand you back to my past self. I travelled to Nova Scotia to meet podcast host, nature enthusiast, and friend of the pod, Ellen Weatherford. Hi everyone, it's me, in Nova Scotia, trudging through the snow. I drove all night to get here. Nova Scotia is a province on the eastern seaboard of Canada, facing the Atlantic Ocean. It's comprised of a large peninsula, along with several thousand islands, jutting out into the water from the Canadian mainland. The climate here is characterised by cold, sub-zero winters and relatively warm summers, a thick coastal fog, and the variability of the weather from day to day. I'm currently in Long Lake Provincial Park on the southern coast, walking along Lakeview Trail. Here we are in the winter, and as such, I'm looking out upon a frozen lake. Some of the trees are without leaves, but most of the surrounding forest is evergreen. Boughs are capped in a generous deposit of fresh snow, as is the ground beneath my feet. The sky above is cloudy and off-white, so I expect there's more snow up there too. As I take in a deep breath of chilled northern air, I'm refreshed, awakened, and I think to myself, I'm alive. Which is a good thing, I suppose. And the reason I'm here on this particular trail? Well, snapping turtles, you are the reason. Every year in recent years, snapping turtles have been sighted within the park along this very trail. That's great news. It means that there's a healthy population becoming established here. And indeed, their nests have been popping up here and there along the trail. There's actually another species of turtle, the painted turtle, living here in the park. In fact, there are 4 species of freshwater turtle which live in Nova Scotia, if we add in the Blandings turtle and the wood turtle. But we're not bothered about them today, because today's the snapping turtle's special day. Not to go on about it or anything, but to me, it's surprising that a turtle can live in a place like this. When I think of a reptile, I may imagine a snake writhing across the Australian outback, its internal fire stoked by the baking sun overhead. I might imagine a crocodile basking along the banks of the River Nile, its mouth gaped open to avoid overheating. I might imagine a sea turtle surfing through warm tropical seas. And yet, here we are, trudging through the snow. I love seeing animals in places you wouldn't expect to find them. I once received such a thrill when I saw pink bunny rabbits flying around in my bedroom and dancing. That might be because I ate about 3 kilos of cheese in bed while reading Alice in Wonderland, before spending the night slipping in and out of a state of semi-consciousness. But the feeling of excitement I got from seeing those dancing bunnies was real either way. I feel like I might be speaking gibberish again, so let's do a jerky transition at breakneck speed back to reality. Already in this Wet and Wild series, we've encountered alligators in the sewers of Florida, eels under the city of Melbourne. Here are some more examples of unexpected residents, let's call them. Also in Melbourne, there are colonies of fairy penguins, the world's smallest penguin species. Penguins in Australia. Who'da thunk it? There are monkeys living in Japan. The snow monkey, or the Japanese macaque, is the world's most northerly and coldest living primate other than humans. Then there's the desert rain frog, which lives in a thin strip of sand dunes stretching along the coastlines of Namibia and South Africa. Perhaps the most surprisingly of all, There are prides of lions living in the Kenyan savannah. Actually, now that I say it out loud, perhaps that one is less shocking. Oh look, it's starting to snow. Just a light sprinkle. Ah. Ah. I'm trying to eat the snow. Snowflakes form, or nucleate, around tiny particles like dust or pollen. Yum yum. I'm trying to eat the snow, even though many snowflakes nucleate around bacteria, such as the bacterium Pseudomonas syringae. Bacteria like these aren't just passively hitchhiking, either. They are living active and fulfilling lives, which I am sure they are very happy with in their own bacteriary way. And they can even influence the weather by inducing rain and snowfall. Anyway, I think I've talked myself out of eating the snow now. There are a few species of snapping turtle living in North America. Here, where we are now in Nova Scotia, we can find the common snapping turtle. It can live to be over 70 years old and becomes sexually mature when it's 17 to 19 years old. It's the largest freshwater turtle in Canada, with a carapace that can reach nearly 50 centimetres. Although it's a lot smaller than its southern relative, the alligator snapping turtle, which is not only larger, but it's spikier, and indeed snappier. The alligator snapping turtle, however, does restrict itself to the warmer water of the continent's southern swamps and lakes. Now, I'd better find Ellen. She's been roaming the landscape in search of a snapping turtle. Usually they're hiding beneath the frozen surface at this time of year, but she's an animal lover through and through, and if anyone can lure one over, then it's her. So, a quick introduction. Today's interviewee, Ellen Weatherford, is host of the Just the Zoo of Us podcast, which is a pun. It's an animal review podcast where she and her husband Christian interview scientists and rate animals out of 10 in effectiveness, ingenuity, and aesthetics. I have to say, I highly recommend giving it a listen. Not only is it informative and funny, but it's also educational and entertaining. Maybe I'm repeating myself there. Ellen previously worked for an anti-LGBTQ charity, and her favourite expression is, "The tide might be rising, but I'm gonna sink your ship." That doesn't sound right. Let me just check my notes. Ah yes, my mistake. Scratch all that. Ellen worked for an LGBTQ charity in support of queer people, and her favourite expression is, "A rising tide lifts all ships." I really have to refer to my notes more. I'm going to get myself in trouble. I asked Ellen if there was an animal she would like to discuss today, and she chose the snapping turtle. That's what's led us all here to this moment. All three of us, you, the listener, and Ellen, and me, Nature Disturbed. I'm still not comfortable sharing my real name. It sure does come up a lot in interviews, which makes editing a chore, but that's the price of anonymity. If someone were to say my name one day during an interview, then I would probably die inside, cringe, and nod through it with a big fake grin stretched across my face. Anyway, here I am, and here you are. We're in Nova Scotia, as I keep saying. Look, over there, through the snowflakes. It's Ellen, and she appears to have done it. She's only gone and found a snapping turtle. The closer I'm getting to her, the more it looks like she's bending down and she's got her finger in its mouth. Yes, it's definitely holding on to her with its beak, but she's smiling and waving and beckoning me over. She seems pretty calm and pleased with herself, and I don't want to rain on her parade, so I guess I'll just not mention it. Ellen, very nice to meet you.
It's so nice to meet you, Lewis. Hi, I feel like we've been like faceless mutuals for so long.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. Thanks so much for agreeing to meet me here in Nova Scotia, where neither of us are from, and neither of us, I guess, have much knowledge about. It seems like an unusual place to meet to find a snapping turtle, but here we are. How are you?
I'm great. Normally when people think of the second largest province in Canada, they don't think of finding a snapping turtle. which one might typically associate more with the sort of swamplands of the American Southeast. And yet here we are in this temperate climate, and we've found ourselves a common snapping turtle, an,
Remarkable.
an
What remarkable
unexpected
creatures.
guest,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
welcomed.
Why did you choose, out of all of the animals in the world that we could have come to observe in the wild, to come and find a snapping turtle?
So I get a chance to talk about animals so frequently, and this is one that I have been just desperate for an opportunity to talk about. Like, I just really, really want to talk about them because I think they're fascinating creatures. They remind me so much of, where I grew up. I kind of grew up around them, and they have been an ever-present sort of facet of my life. And so I really wanted to talk about some of the more unexpected adaptations of snapping turtles, I think, to all of the different places that they can live. People definitely associate them more with the more southern and eastern parts of the United States, but as evidenced by this one right here in Nova Scotia, their
The big
range can
boy.
extend all the way up into eastern Canada. And people, I think, don't really associate reptiles, particularly with very far northern places. I think a lot of people understand that reptiles are exothermic. So, exothermic being the sort of sciencey sounding word for what a lot of people would understand as cold-blooded. So, they lack the internal mechanisms to keep their body warm on their own. Typically, you check a person's temperature pretty much any day of the week, it's going to be 98.6 or somewhere around there, right? We can regulate our own body temperature. Reptiles can't necessarily do that like internally. So they have to use factors in their environment to keep them warm. So you don't really think about reptiles living in a very cold place. Seems like it's a little rough for them. If you ever see a reptile, like when it starts to get really, really cold, they slow way down, right? Like their
Mm.
energy reserves are so low. And this is what snapping turtles do, like either when, in the wintertime when it gets really chilly, or, if they're living way up far north in a place where it's going to be really cold. So in the winter, when temperatures get really low, snapping turtles, like other types of turtles or really other reptiles in general, they enter this sort of state of torpor where their whole metabolism just kind of like grinds to a halt, just slows way, way, way down. It's kind of like power saver mode. Like if you're when your phone is on like 5% battery and it doesn't let
Yeah,
you like use your camera or anything. You know what I mean? When you're
yeah.
like, oh man, I can't like listen to music or whatever because it's on power saver mode.
So it sounds like they're able to live in cold environments by kind of changing the definition of what life is. They take a different approach to that.
They're able to survive.
Yeah,
They're like, I cannot die for a while it's cold. So yeah, they can really survive off of no food. So they can go months without eating. And this I think surprises people about reptiles is that since they have these really slow metabolisms, because their body isn't putting in so much work to keep themselves warm all the time, they can get away with a lot less food. So people who like own snakes will tell you they are not feeding their snake every single day. So snapping turtles, just like that, they can slow their metabolism down to a halt. So they're not eating any food and they're actually not even getting very much oxygen. Because something we haven't mentioned about snapping turtles yet is that they are aquatic turtles. So they're spending most of their time underwater. They're spending very little time outside of the water. The only time they really come out of the water is when they're traveling to look for a place to lay their eggs or they're looking for a mate or something like that. They really are spending most of their time in the water. And if they had to constantly come up to the air to breathe every like few minutes or so, that would be wasting a lot of energy that they
yeah,
need to be saving. So they need to be able to stay still and they need to be able to sort of operate on very, very little oxygen. Another thing is that the surface of the water that they live under might be frozen, right? Like
right.
in the wintertime, the lakes are frozen over. So they couldn't even come up for air if they wanted to. They're trapped.
Yeah, that's Nova Scotia.
There you go, through and through.
That's what we say about it.
Famous, famous for its frozen lakes.
Yeah.
Anyone who's been here can tell you. There's also an interesting sort of like property of water. I don't know if this is anything you've come across before, but the colder water is, the more dissolved oxygen it can hold.
Hmm.
So like colder water can actually like have more oxygen in it. So these turtles can often be trapped underwater for months at a time. So they cannot come up for air during that time. Luckily, like other types of aquatic turtles, they have these specialized cells in some parts of their skin. So, in some parts of their skin where there's like a lot of blood vessels near the surface of the skin, they have these like permeable sort of cells that are actually able to absorb and respirate oxygen from the water around them. So
Oh.
rather than having to like breathe it into their lungs the way other like vertebrates do, the way, well, I shouldn't say other vertebrates because like, you've got like fish and stuff like that that have gills. But other reptiles have to breathe in through lungs. But they have these special cells in their skin that can absorb the oxygen. And then, so one place that they have these cells is in their throats. So they can just kind of open their mouth and take in some of that oxygen from the water around them. But another place is their butthole. So, in the thin skin where the blood vessels are really, really close to the surface around their cloaca, which for a reptile is kind of the like Swiss Army hole. It's like one hole does it all. It's coming in, it's going out, it's everything for this hole. So it is the
Multi-purpose
same.
hole.
It does it all. What can't she do?
Can it sing?
Honestly, let's get a mic down there.
Yeah.
It can at least lip sync at the
Yeah,
very
okay.
least.
Yeah. Well, it can't be
Um,
all.
that's going to be on the next season of Drag Race. I feel like it's going to be someone
Cloacal
cloacal lip sync.
respiration.
So yeah, their butthole basically can absorb oxygen through the skin, so they can actually be taking in not air but oxygen from the water, and they couldn't survive on it forever. It's not that much oxygen, it's not a lot, it's kind of just supplementing their regular oxygen intake. So they couldn't survive on it forever, but it will get them through the winter because during the winter they have that slowed metabolic rate, so it's like just enough that they can kind of survive. But like you mentioned, I mean, at what cost, are you really even truly living?
Yeah, it's really an unusual thing to imagine a turtle living underneath the ice. Uh,
Right. Like if you look out at like a frozen lake or anything like that, it looks so like still and hostile. And you don't think that there would be something under there that normally you would expect would need to come up to breathe. But they're like, no, I'm good actually.
yeah, least of all a reptile.
Yeah, because you don't, like we said earlier, like you don't really expect reptiles to be thriving in such cold places, but they're pretty well adapted to it. So they can survive really, really cold temperatures, which lets them get higher up into the north. Unlike things like maybe like larger reptiles, things like alligators wouldn't be able to get that far north, or like, the invasive pythons down in Florida or something. They are kind of sequestered into like the
Hmm.
southern end of Florida because there's sort of like a point in Florida where it's north enough that during the winter, like it gets cold enough that the pythons can't get that much farther north. But there's a problem. So as temperatures are getting warmer and warmer, that line that like pythons can survive at inches higher and higher. Because if those like parts of northern Florida aren't getting freezes every winter, the pythons can survive there. So like the only thing keeping the pythons like we're like slow, it's like in Game of Thrones, like the White Walkers, like we've got like the wall of the north, but like in Florida keeping the pythons into like the peninsula, and every year it gets pushed back a little bit more.
So if there wasn't enough incentive to fight global warming, the pythons are coming.
Yeah, they're down there. Uh, but on sort of the topic of, climate change and how climate change can interact with, reptile populations and stuff like that, there is a really interesting vulnerability that a lot of reptiles, including snapping turtles, have to global warming and climate change. And it is something called temperature dependent sex determination. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know about this. Like I found out about this just like pretty like just a few years ago, I feel like. So for a lot of reptiles, when the egg is laid, the sort of ambient temperature around the egg while the egg is incubating affects whether the hatchling is male or female. So it's not like how I think like, human zygotes, right, like it kind of begins when the zygote begins developing. It is like as an egg, the climate and the environment around the egg decides whether so during a sort of like a particular season, depending on what kind of temperatures you're getting during that season, your population could end up being like 80% male
Yeah.
or like 90% female because of what temperature it was that season. Both common snapping turtles and alligator snapping turtles, which is a different species. These are different species. The common snapping turtle is Calydra serpentina, and the alligator snapping turtle is Macrochelys temminki.
Mm.
And so for both species, there's this sort of like band of temperatures right around 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 26.5 degrees Celsius, which is pretty warm. It's toasty. I would say that's maybe like a spring temperature in like Florida. That particular temperature would produce male hatchlings, but just like 2 degrees warmer or colder, and you're going to get female hatchlings. So with global warming, with climate change, if you're getting these like constantly growing and raising temperatures, you end up with populations where you're either having way too many males or way too many females. And then that's going to affect their ability to like maintain their populations. And I've even heard of like these captive breeding programs that different like institutions or universities or stuff like that will have where they'll bring in the eggs of these they could do it with turtles, they could do it with any sort of native like reptiles, or I think amphibians will do this too, and they will incubate them indoors where they can control their temperature and like incubate them in such a way to make them turn out male or female so that they can re-release them. I think people don't think about that when they think about how like temperature change affects wildlife. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That feels like you're chasing a shifting goalpost. Is that, I think that might be a sports reference,
Mm-mm.
so it's probably not quite accurate, but yeah, playing catch up, I guess. Because you can only do that for so long, can't you help balance the sex ratios in the wild before
Right,
the
like
earth is hot and yeah, there's not really an end goal, unfortunately.
right, like what are we going to do this forever? Like are
Yeah.
we going to have to become like the sole sort of like arbiters of reptile populations
Yeah.
because otherwise they'll all be male or they'll all be it's different like from species to species, right? Like some might hatch female at high temperatures, some might hatch male at high temperatures. It's going to be kind of across the species. So, what are we going to do? Like, we can't be reptile keepers for the entire planet. We just don't have the infrastructure for that. It's a way that like people can help, but like I feel like it's not sustainable in mass. Like we
Mm.
we obviously can't do that forever. It's a band-aid on a
Yeah,
much bigger
exactly. Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. But I'm glad that people are doing it at the moment.
Mm. Snapping turtles all they have this really interesting adaptation to warm temperature or to cold temperatures and this relationship to temperature and everything like that, but the thing that I really wanted to talk about with snapping turtles, so I mentioned earlier that there are a few different species of snapping turtles. The common snapping turtle I think is the one with the widest range. You can find them in a lot of places. The alligator snapping turtle is one that I don't know its full range. They definitely are from where I'm from, which is Florida. Different species from the common snapping turtle. They are huge. They can get up to like 2 feet across, like with the shell, the carapace can be like 2 feet
Mm.
across. I saw some reports that some of them could exceed 400 pounds. That's certainly not common. They're usually more in like the 100 to 150 pound range, which is very large for a
Yeah.
turtle.
Yeah, it's another very prehistoric looking animal.
It does, and because of how like the carapace is also so spiky, You
Yeah,
know, like
like a
the alligator snapping
dinosaur.
turtle is the one that has like big horns all over it almost. It is 100% giving dinosaur. It like is giving like ankylosaur. My youngest has been watching a lot of Jurassic World, the like animated series of Jurassic World, and there's like an ankylosaur in the show, and I feel like that looks like it 100%.
And of course, the beak, which I guess is where it gets its name from.
Yes, the beak. So the beak is kind of like this, it has a sharp point in the front, right? And then it's got this sort of razor edge all the way around. So I don't know about this common snapping turtle. The common snapping turtle will ruin your day. Like you steer very well clear of them. I'll talk in a couple minutes about what to do if you like encounter one. It's happened to me. So I can give you firsthand experience of what to do when you are face to face with a snapping turtle.
And it's
But
happening to us right now. Don't forget about the one that's at
as
our
we
gate.
speak, well, this one was invited.
Yeah.
This is our guest of honor.
We're here as equals.
The alligator snapping turtle, I think, has an especially intimidating beak. So the alligator snapping turtle has a silhouette that is like a staple remover. You know, have you ever
Yeah.
used a staple remover and they look kind of like the Thundercats logo? I feel like they have that shape of the beak. It is like really long and hooked and curved. And they can and will cleanly slice a finger off. It has happened before. It's not super common, but it's happened enough for you to
Not want to
give
put
them
your hand in
a
there.
wide berth.
It's not surprising looking at the mouth of one of those creatures.
Well,
Formidable.
there is something surprising inside the mouth of one of those
Oh,
creatures. So first of all, like in addition to the beak, right? So the beak is very sharp and chompy. They also have a much longer and more flexible neck than people expect them to. So they can really kind of like that's what actually the specific name serpentina of the common snapping turtle is kind of a reference to how like their neck can be surprisingly snake-like. People don't
hmm.
expect it to get out as high as they can. So people tend to like if they're trying to help one cross a road, they think they can just kind of grab it on the sides and hold it like a hamburger, and they don't realize that those things they can and will like just
Hmm.
kind of snake right around and grab you. But so inside of the beak of the alligator snapping turtle, I'm pretty sure this is not true of the common snapping turtle, but the alligator snapping turtle inside of their beak, their tongue is tipped with this sort of like fleshy appendage. It's not the tongue itself, but it's like a sort of add-on to the tongue. And this like fleshy part looks exactly like a worm. It is shaped and colored exactly like just a little worm that you would find on like the bottom of a river. So when they're hunting, they're not active hunters. They're not swimming around, like looking for prey. They're not doing that. They lie perfectly still. They go like settle onto the bottom of the river or the lake or something like that, which is why I don't swim in rivers and lakes in Florida. They settle into the bottom. They lie perfectly still. They're so like sedentary that they're usually sort of covered in this layer of algae that just blankets them. So they blend right in. It's really hard. You would think these things being so huge and bulky and spiky looking, you'd think you'd notice them right away. They blend in really, really well. And they just hold their mouth wide open. So gaping maw, huge sarlacc pit of a mouth, and then they just wiggle their tongue around. And that little fleshy part that looks like a worm kind of wiggles back and forth, and it acts as a lure that attracts the attention of fish. And fish come swim right up to it. And they go all the way into the alligator snapping turtle's mouth. They have no idea that the sword of Damocles is hanging right over their heads. And then they just like guillotine them.
So it's hard to decide what the most striking feature of the snapping turtle is in this case. Is it the fact that it's a giant turtle, or its razor bill, or the fact that it's got little fake worms dangling in its mouth and it's fishing?
Or the butthole breathing. I feel like there's a lot to be said for the butthole breathing as
Yeah, yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We can't forget the cloacal respiration.
Like that alone I feel like is so devious and so diabolical. Like I love mimicry. That's awesome when that happens. And like the fact that theirs is so sort of specialized to like specifically look like a word. It reminds me of the spider-tailed vipers, right? Like the snakes where the tail of it looks like a spider and they like
Oh,
wag their tail
really?
around. It's
Wow.
so cool. So all of this is sort of like things that you can kind of look at and be like, wow, that's a cool thing. That's a cool thing. That's a cool thing. I came across something that I had never heard of before, did not know, that forced me to fall Alice in Wonderland style into a rabbit hole so much deeper than I thought I was going to get into. There was this 2015 study that showed that young snapping turtles tended to align their bodies along magnetic fields. So, like at rest, they would just sort of naturally orient themselves along like a magnetic field. So,
Hmm.
whether that was along just Earth's magnetic field or when they were exposed to like radio frequencies, they would like align themselves with that too.
Right.
So, this study was using radio frequency fields to test the turtle's magnetic alignment. And what they found was that radio waves did seem to disrupt the turtle's orientation. Like it disrupted their ability to orient themselves with a magnetic field. And this kind of suggested that they use a type of magnetoreception. There are different types of ways that animals can detect magnetic fields. So there's one type that you may have heard of that's more common in, I think, birds, where they use basically naturally occurring like magnetite, like
Hmm.
magnetic metals in their actual
Oh,
brains.
wow.
So it's the thing with pigeons. They have actual like magnetic metals like that naturally occur in their
Oh,
like
really?
brains,
Is that why they're
which
so
is
good at finding their way home, I guess?
yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, so that's a little bit better for like positioning, like showing you how far north or south, or like that's a little bit more like GPS. But it seemed like, based on this study, the turtles seem to be using a different mechanism of magnetoreception, which is called a radical pair mechanism. And this involves quantum entanglement, which
Okay, let's get into it.
this is something that when I saw that, I was like, oh boy, here we go. So just so first of all, the study that I was reading that showed, this behavior in snapping turtles, it's called spontaneous magnetic alignment by yearling snapping turtles, rapid association of radio frequency dependent pattern of magnetic input with novel surroundings. And that was by Lucas Landler et al. In the Public Library of Science, one in May of 2015.
Lupus
Um,
Landler. That's a good name.
Lucas,
Oh,
Lucas, Lukas. A little
okay.
less cool, but
That's less cool. No offense, Lucas.
that pointed me towards, I was like, well, what is this? What is a radical pair mechanism? I need to learn more about this. So I took chemistry in college. I was okay at it. Haven't taken chemistry since. So I had a lot of ground to cover here, and I did my best. So here's
Yay.
my understanding of the literally 6 hours of reading that I did about this.
Oh, okay.
It was one of those things where I was like, there's no reason for me to have to know all this, but you know what? I have to anyway, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to go to sleep. Okay, so there's a type of protein. It's called a cryptochrome. How cool is that name? Immediately I'm in. You tell me there's something called a cryptochrome, I'm like, thank you.
It sounds a little bit like it's traded online.
It sounds like a scam. So this is a type of protein. It's called a cryptochrome. And these types of proteins, when they are exposed to blue light, they form something called a radical pair. So a radical is a type of like molecule that has an odd number of electrons. So electrons usually need to be paired up with a buddy, and the electrons that they're paired with usually have opposite spins from each other. There's a property called spin. Um, it's not super important that you understand spin super well. Just know that they have a property called spin. And usually electrons that are paired with each other have opposite spins. So they're kind of in equilibrium with each other.
Hmm.
So when you have a molecule that has an odd number of electrons, you've got an electron left off that has no buddy.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
unpaired. He can spin whatever way he wants. So when these cryptochromes react to blue light, electrons get transferred. So, like an electron from one molecule leaves and goes to another molecule, leaving you now with two molecules that have an odd number of electrons. But since those electrons started off paired together, they're still paired to each other when they
Okay.
separate and go to different molecules. They're paired to each other in a state of quantum entanglement. Have you ever heard of quantum entanglement?
No, never. This is my first venture into quantum entanglement.
So, a huge, huge, huge flashing neon sign of a disclaimer. I'm not a physicist. I don't understand quantum mechanics that like I'm not at that level. But this concept of quantum entanglement is where two particles are correlated with each other in such a way where they can be separated by huge distances, but still function as one entity. What happens to one happens to the other, like
Sounds
a change of state in
romantic.
one. It honestly, like it does have this sense of like a long distance relationship, like no matter how far we're separated, we're still like connected. So that's the idea is that these two particles are entangled together, where, what affects one will affect the other. So the electrons in these radicals, which are molecules with an odd number of electrons, the electrons are unpaired like within their molecule, but they're entangled together. Those electrons can either spin in opposite directions where they're in a state of equilibrium and everything's like kind of calm and okay. And that is called a singlet state, or they can both spin in the same direction, which that puts them in a much more energetically excited triplet state. That's like a little bit more like unstable. It's like a higher energy state.
An unstable
So
relationship.
it's so unhealthy, honestly. It's toxic. And just like any unstable and toxic relationship, the pair oscillates back and forth
Right.
between being in the state of a calm singlet state and an energetically excited triplet state. So the radical pair is going back and forth. It's going singlet, triplet, singlet, triplet. It's switching back and forth. So that's kind of like in their normal state, like not being influenced by anything else. Enter a magnetic field. A magnetic field gives these electrons a little nudge in a particular direction. It says, hey, maybe you should spin this way. So it's kind of like influencing all of those radicals. This is going to increase the rate of one of those two states. It's going to skew, like it's going to make them a little bit more likely to be in one state than the other. So the magnetic field is affecting the frequency and intensity of those oscillations between states. So
Hmm.
you can kind of like plot this on a chart where you can see like they're a singlet and now they're a triplet, now they're a singlet and now they're a triplet. So it's going to make that oscillation either happen a lot more quickly or happen a lot more slowly, or like when it does happen, it's going to be much more pronounced or something like that. Like you can see the way that the magnetic field is affecting the switching back and forth between states. Somehow, this is the big somehow. This is the thing that like nobody really seems to know.
Not even
The
Lucas.
animals, not even Lucas, not even what's his name, PJ Hoare, who was the person who wrote the paper I read all this from. The animal's brain is able to pick up on those oscillations and those changes in the frequency of their oscillations between a singlet and triplet state and understand what that means about their position, like relative to the magnetic field. That mechanism, not understood. Like nobody knows how they're doing this. There's just something happening. They can just somehow understand, okay, these like radicals are oscillating states more frequently now. So that must mean I'm facing northeast, right? Like they're able to pick up on stuff like that and somehow act on that information. So that paper was called The Radical Pair Mechanism of Magnetoreception. And that was by PJ Hoare et al. And that was in the Annual Review of Biophysics in July of 2016. He also does a really, really helpful YouTube video that I watched where he's explaining what all of this means, because it's a little complicated, especially if you, like me, never took organic chemistry, because there's a lot of organic chemistry happening here, which I don't fully understand. But this was my best understanding of the mechanism. So basically, they're like using these quantum entangled, very, very interesting particle relationships to each other to determine which way they're pointed.
Which I guess they will incorporate somehow into their behavior. Not sure how they do
Yeah,
that.
it seems to mostly be for navigation, because these types of turtles while they will kind of spend a lot of their life like in one particular place, like they'll find a place and be like, this works for me. They will travel to find new places to lay their eggs, or they'll travel to find a mate. Like they can travel long distances over land, which is how you can encounter one trying to cross a road. This is probably like the most common way that people encounter snapping turtles is because they're slow, right? They're very slow on land. They're very fast in the water, but they're very slow on land. So if you do happen to be driving down the road and you, this has actually happened to me. This is my personal experience. I was driving down the road at my college in University of North Florida, and as happens very frequently in Florida, there's a turtle in the road. The sort of standard operating procedure for there's a turtle in the road, because you probably do it like once a week, it's like you stop, you can kind of like nudge them along. If they're a small turtle, you can pick them up by the sides and like just kind of lift them and walk them. You always, 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 if you come across a turtle in the road, always, always, always move it in the direction it was going. If it was trying to go, I don't know, east, don't put it back on the west side. Like don't try to put like make them start over because they're just going to do it again.
Mm.
Like you have not solved the problem. So always put them in the direction they were trying to go. If it's a small turtle, like a little, I don't know, slider or something like that, boop, you just help them cross, and that's no big deal. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna help this turtle across. He's like in the dead center of the street. He's gonna get hit by a car. So I pull over, to the side. I put my hazards on and I get out and I walk up to it. And I realize as I'm walking up to it that this is a snapping turtle, not a regular like little pond slider. This is like a snapping turtle. And I was like, I think you got this one, Chief. Like, I think you're good actually. Like, I don't think you need my help. I think you're actually fine. I just kind of was like, all right, I'm definitely not suited to handle this creature. Like I said, those things can whip their head around and snap a finger off. So I just kind of watched for a little while. There are a few things you can do if they're like in immediate danger, like it's like a really busy road or something like that. Or maybe if it's really, really hot and like maybe there's like sun on the ground, and they're just kind of in danger where they're at. You can nudge them along, not with anything that you don't want damaged. you know you kind of push them along with a maybe like a broom or a shovel or something that you have in your car, a barrier of sorts that will keep them from biting your hand. But people say to pick them up by the tail. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
That's not good. No, that will hurt the turtle very badly. It's
Yeah.
not good because now
Yeah.
you've just kind of like got him angry and given him sort of like a propulsion. Like now he can just kind of swing around, right? Like you've really
Yeah.
increased his range of movement at that point.
Yeah.
So people, yeah, don't pick them up by the tail. You can either nudge them with like a shovel or a broom or whatever you have on hand. If there's like if for whatever reason you absolutely have to pick them up, which I don't recommend because like many other reptiles, they can carry salmonella. So you can get quite sick from handling a turtle. You can kind of grab them by the back, like behind their back legs, and pick them up that way. You're probably still going to get scratched because these things are mean. If it's an alligator snapping turtle, you just turn around and walk away. You need
Yeah.
to put some distance between you and this
Run.
fool. They don't need your help. But yeah, you can just kind of help them along their way. You can pick them up from the back if you absolutely have to. If you don't absolutely have to, don't. You do not want to deal with salmonella or get a disease from this turtle or anything like that. Don't take them home. Don't take them home.
No. Okay, so that's a very helpful public service announcement, I suppose, for people, especially in America, who might be encountering a rarity among turtles, which is one that can fully 360 and
No
bite your
scope you.
finger off. Yeah.
Well,
So,
especially in places like Nova Scotia where maybe you don't expect to see them, so maybe you haven't been equipped with knowledge,
yeah,
like growing up in sort of swampier places, you typically are equipped with like
don't touch
that's probably
anything.
not your it's probably not your first rodeo, this is probably not your first tangle with a snapping turtle.
And I think they're probably all very friendly here in Nova Scotia to their own detriment, just trying to help things out. But they have to learn, the Canadians.
Yeah, you gotta kind of you gotta let that one slide. I think you have
Yeah.
to fight that impulse.
I was going to ask you, as an American, if there is any kind of cultural symbolism or cultural identity. It sounds like it's not unlikely that you would happen across one in a road. I mean, perhaps that's the extent of the of human snapping turtle relations.
I think that in general, people, well, they are kind of outshone, right? Like there's the alligator, right? In a lot of the places where you would find a snapping turtle, you would probably also find alligators, which I think get a lot more attention.
Mm.
So I think as far as like cultural, I guess, symbolism or relevance, the alligator kind of steals the show. Or maybe like a venomous snake, like a cottonmouth or a rattlesnake or something would often get people's attention more than a snapping turtle. But I do know that snapping turtles historically have been used as a food source. They have been eaten. And I don't know, I mean, I love them and I relate to them and I feel very like, I don't know, at home when I see one, I'm like, that's my boy right there. That's my neighbor. That's my guy. Like, I've seen him. I know him.
A friendly face.
Yeah, it feels like they feel familiar. So there is, of course, a was it a Vine or was it just a TikTok or something like that? There was this video where this lady said a snapping turla, and like that was all anyone said for like a year.
My Lord, a snapping turtle. Wow. I hope that's all in there.
Wow, Vine.
It was either it doesn't feel that old. It must have been a TikTok, but there was at least a moment where people were invoking the name of the snapping turtle, which I guess is a
Mm.
PR win. I think people typically like see them as not quite a pest, but like a nuisance in the
Yeah.
sense that people don't usually like to see snapping turtles around because it makes that, first of all, they get into people's pools. Like they can kind of get into people's yards and get into people's pools. And then it kind of feels like having like a bear trap. It just makes you feel like, oh, like it puts you on edge and makes you a little like more wary around bodies of water, which anyone, if you're spending any amount of time in Florida, you should be wary. They might be in like the top five of like your concerns in the water. Like the alligator snapping turtle is going to be up there, but like you have other problems. There's like flesh-eating bacteria.
So is that a common thing people do in Florida? They will go swimming in fresh water there.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but you have to be pretty wary. Like it has to be pretty shallow water. I mean, not fresh water, not so much. What people will do, if it's just like a river, people don't usually swim in the river. You don't usually swim in a river, you don't usually swim in a lake, something like that. First of all, it's kind of gnarly in there. Probably going to be really muddy. It's going to be really murky and there's going to be a lot of tannins in the water. You get that like Coca-Cola water,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Where like it's natural. It's like tannin. People think it's pollution. It's not. It's tannins in the water that's natural. But you do get this sort of like water that kind of looks like maybe black tea or coffee. And also usually kind of lined with like cypress knees or like marsh grasses or stuff where like it's not
Mm.
gonna be this kind of water you would probably just like go vibe in, with sort of a notable exceptions of like springs. So if you have like a spring or like a spring run where the spring flows like from the spring to like to a river or something like that, we have spent quite a few summer mornings. You'd want to go in the morning because past noon it's going to be insufferably hot. But
Mm.
then you jump in the water. But we've spent a few nice summer days like tubing down a spring run where like you start at
Mm.
the spring and like you tube down, which can be really, really pleasant. And that's really nice. But like the water's crystal clear in a spring. So you can see if there's anything around you. And usually they're so populated that like most gators or snapping turtles or something, they're not going to hang out there because they know there's usually people there.
Yeah.
So they'll leave you alone. But if it's just like a lake or a river, like people don't usually swim in the river because
No.
it's gross and you don't know what's in there and you can't see what's underneath and you're probably not gonna. Since I come from Florida and you live in Australia, I one thing that I feel like so often I have seen Florida and Australia seem so energetically connected almost. Do you know what I mean? Like
There's a lot of things that in the hot water that want to eat you.
yeah. Uh, like being in a, because I have come from a place with lots of sort of hostile wet wildlife. and moved up to a place where there is none.
Mm,
You can get in any body of water and it's fine.
yeah.
There's like not going to be really much of anything in the water that's going to hurt you, which is a foreign experience. But I feel like you've done the opposite thing.
Yeah.
Like you've come from a place with quite safe water and now moved to a place where things can hurt you very badly. Has that affected your relationship with the nature around you in Australia?
Hmm. Oh, that's an interesting question. I suppose I live in actually it may seem like that on the surface because there's not too many creatures that are after you in the UK. In England, it's so cold. It's like a bit
Mm,
painful. I think almost all of the rivers are quite polluted at the moment, which is very unfortunate.
mm.
They're doing a couple of things, not quite enough, but beavers have come back, which is a great thing for the health
Oh,
of the
that's so
water. Yeah.
exciting.
And I have done some tubing here in Victoria where we don't have to worry about crocodiles, and you get a really unique viewpoint of river wildlife. You get to see it from an angle that you don't usually see it from, which is really cool.
Hmm.
Huntsman
One of the cool
spiders
things.
overhead.
I would love to see that. I like the spiders too. I get excited about the spiders. One of the coolest tubing experiences I had, first of all, a cute thing you can often see tubing in, I would imagine anywhere in North America, is raccoons, because
Mm.
raccoons will come down to the water, and they wash their paws, which is a lot of times people will interpret that as like a hygiene thing, or like they're like washing their food. It's actually kind of more interesting than that. Their paws are how they like sense things. It's how they like learn things about the object that they're holding. They're very, very sensitive, but their skin is much more sensitive when it's wet.
Mm.
So they're actually just wetting their fingers so that they can like better understand the object they're holding. You can tell that that's what they're doing because they'll do this even when the object is not edible and they know what it is and they know that it's not edible. Like they'll do this even for stuff that they don't plan to eat. If they like pick
Mm.
up someone's like, I don't know, if they pick up like someone's phone, something like that, they'll still dunk it in the water because they're just wetting their paws. They know it's not food. They can smell it, right? They know it's not food.
Yeah.
Um, but you can still see them do that. They'll wash their hands when they're not holding anything, right? They'll
Mm.
do this even when there's nothing in their hands. They're just doing it to sort of have a better sense of their environment. But probably the coolest thing we ever saw when we were tubing, manatees swam underneath
Oh
us.
wow.
And this was during the summer, so you really would have expected the manatees to have already swam out of like the freshwater, like the estuaries and stuff, and to have already gone back out where they'll go out farther, like into the sea or into the ocean. But there was still a few stragglers left behind in the spring run, and there were these manatees. And it was really cool is that they would have people there, like rangers, like park rangers, basically, whose job is they wear these bright orange high vis vests and they kayak down the river and they're like manatee like escorts basically like they like escort the manatee down like while they're swimming to make sure that people aren't messing with them, right? Because there's
Mm.
like people swimming and tubing and these rangers are there to like protect them and like make sure that they get through unbothered. And it was so we were tubing down the spring run and we see these rangers with their kayaks on and I was like, oh, maybe we'll see the manatees. And we look down and there's one like probably maybe only like 5 or 6 feet below us. Like if I had stretched my feet out I probably could have touched it, but you're not supposed to do that.
Wow, what an incredible wildlife encounter.
It was really, really cool on much, much kinder terms than my snapping turtle encounter.
I guess there's pros and cons to living in Florida.
Yeah, I feel like as someone who has left Florida, I feel like I have a complicated relationship with
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah.
There's things I love about it and there's things I don't love about it. But I do always get excited when we come back to visit, like when we visit family for holidays and stuff. It's always nice to, see the lizards everywhere and, see the sort of the really cool, wading birds and local reptiles and stuff that we're like, ah, there's my buddy. There's my
Mm.
guy.
I wondered if you would do something that I know that you do quite well, which is rate the snapping turtle based
Oh,
on aesthetics
that's one of them for sure.
and ingenuity and
Yes.
effectiveness.
Yes, I will do that. I That is our bit. That is our shtick, our gimmick on our show is that we rate animals out of 10. The order that we usually use on our show, we start with effectiveness, which is physical adaptation, so things built into the animal's body that let it do a good job of the things it's trying to do, whether that is find prey or not become prey themselves. I'm gonna like focus on the alligator snapping turtle because I like them very much. They're like one of my favorite animals. So I would definitely give the alligator snapping turtle a 10 out of 10 for effectiveness. I
Oh.
think nobody's doing it like them. I think they're unparalleled, they're unrivaled, they're unmatched. So I think it's full marks for effectiveness. For ingenuity, which is like behaviors, things that they're actually doing to like solve problems or navigate their environment, it's probably going to be like a 4 or 5, I think, for us, an alligator snapping turtle. Turtles in general, there's not a ton happening in there. You know what I mean? Like they're mostly focused on not dying. Like
Mm.
there's not really a lot of active participation in life.
Yeah.
There's sort of a lot of pick one spot and stay in that spot for your entire life. I just think that, which is great. I'm happy for them. And I think that's an awesome way to live your life. I can't say that it's particularly ingenious. And I think the only points I would give them, if I gave them like a 4, it would mostly be for like wiggling their little tongue as a lure, because that's pretty
Yeah.
clever. That's a
Yeah.
pretty sneaky little treat.
I'm
Right.
surprised. I feel like you're a harsh marker,
I mean, well, I've given out a few, I've given out some ones and twos.
really.
Um, yeah, you
Who
hate
did
to
they
see
go
it,
to?
but unfortunately it does happen. Well, I usually give things like jellyfish ones and twos for like ingenuity, but
Yeah.
sometimes I will give like moths low effectiveness marks because in their adult form, once they emerge as like, an adult, say like a Luna moth or something like that, they have shed every possible survival mechanism they have. Like they leave behind, they don't have mouths, they can't
Oh,
eat, they have like very little defensive mechanisms. Like they have just left behind all sort of self-preservation. They're just here for a good time. They're just here to mate and that's it. So I feel like that's a waste.
yeah, okay. So it's a 4 for ingenuity.
I think so. And then for aesthetics, I think I'm going to give them like a 9 or a 10, maybe a 9 for the alligator snapping turtle. And it's largely spike based. I think the spikes are great. They look like a little grenade. The head looks like a Thundercats logo, which is really, really cool. And the only room for improvement I could see would be if we got some cool like colors or markings. If you've ever seen something like a map turtle, Mississippi map turtle, they have some interesting markings, especially on their underside. So, like, there are some types of turtles that get really, really cool, like designs and colors and stuff on their carapace, and I would like to see some more of that. So, that might be why I would give them a 9 instead of a 10, but I think they
Okay.
look really cool.
Yeah, okay. And then I reckon maybe you could get a 10 from one that was particularly well endowed with algae on its back.
Ooh, because that's like scratching the itch of I love an overgrown aesthetic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if in like I love a sci-fi world that's like post-apocalyptic and the world has been overgrown with nature. Like I love that. I love the look of like grass and ferns like taking over a structure. So like if you had like a real big ancient snapping turtles can live like 70, 80 years. I've heard reports that they could live up to like 150 years, but I don't know if that's ever been documented. So I
Mm.
can't say like for sure that they can live that long. Turtles are known to live a long time. But if you had like a real big sort of ancient like snapping turtle that was just huge and like, was like dripping with it wouldn't be probably moss, but if it was like covered in algae and real overgrown and stuff. So it looks like an old one, like an
Mm.
old god or something like
Yeah,
that. That would
yeah, yeah,
be
yeah.
looks like a temple. Oh, I love that. Now
I
we're
love
getting into world turtle territory.
world turtle.
Yeah, like a world turtle.
Is
Which
it?
is not like a real turtle. It's just like a fiction trope. There's like
Oh,
a trope
yeah.
in fiction of like a turtle with a world on its back or something. You see this, it pops up in all sorts of like science fiction and fantasy and stuff. It's in like real world like mythology of some like different religions and cultures have like a world turtle mythology, but you see it a lot in, I think there was like a one in Avatar, The Last Airbender. There was like turtles that had like land masses on their backs, and they had there's a Pokemon that has one on Torterra that has a big like land mass on its back.
I saw
Like
your
it's
shirt.
oh yeah, I got a Pikachu shirt on right now.
I think Terry Pratchett maybe ha his Discworld is on the
Yeah.
back of a turtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I guess there feels something very singular about the shell of a turtle in the expanse of an ocean. And yeah, they do.
Especially a sea turtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have actually, I was very, very lucky in that I saw some wild sea turtles when I was snorkeling over a reef. I think it would have been in Hawaii that I saw a sea turtle. And it was really serene. It was a really, really cool, beautiful experience.
Yeah, that's lovely. Did you ever see The Neverending Story?
Yes, Morla. There was
Marla,
Morla,
yeah.
the giant turtle was in the Neverending Story. Yeah, I forgot all about Morla, but that was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. I loved that movie. And I read the book
Did
when I was
you?
in high school too.
How was it?
It's a trip. It is
Really?
wild. Yes. If I had read the book first, not knowing that it already was a movie, and you had asked me if they could make a movie adaptation of it, I would have said it was unfilmable.
Mm.
Like it is so abstract. Even like the book in the book things are described as being like impossible to visualize or like just sort of incomprehensible. So, which was like interesting to read about, but if you had asked me, I would have said there's no way this like a movie could do it justice.
I think I might have to read that. I'm a very slow reader, but
Oh
that,
my God,
that
I take months to read a book.
yeah, same. Yeah, okay, so lots of turtles in fiction then.
Yeah, for sure. In really, really cool ways. I think we could do with more snapping turtles, but that's just me.
I was curious to know, obviously, by the way that you talk and the fact that you have a podcast dedicated to discussing animals, what made you want to set up the podcast? How did that happen?
Yeah. So in 2019, a lot of people like started podcasting during the sort of like height of the pandemic, like 2020, 2021. And we just happened to scoot in just before that. So it was in 2019 where my husband and I have been a podcast listener, like a science podcast listener since I was 12. I
Oh,
started listening to
wow.
Radio Lab with my mom when I was like 12 years old. So I have listened for a very long time. And so I've always listened to podcasts. I listen to a lot of them. I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts and stuff like that. And at the time, my husband and I both were listening to a lot of comedy podcasts, like on long car rides or on commutes or just during the workday, like something to help pass time. And we kind of just were like, wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be silly just to like get some microphones and like do a podcast like as a bit? Like, wouldn't this be a fun and silly thing to do? And we kind of like had the idea to do a podcast before we knew what we were going to talk about. But one of the things that we did like spend a lot of time, I've also been, a lifelong animal nerd, grew up on in sort of the golden age of animal media, right? Of like Animal
Animal
Planet,
Planet, yeah.
the sort of, but like the Animal Planet, like golden age, right? Where they like had like good stuff. So
Yeah, Steve Irwin, Crocodile Hunter, Jeff,
hmm
was his name Jeff
Jeff
Corwin?
Corwin.
Oh my, I had a
Yeah.
real crush on him before before I knew what a crush was. I was like in love with that man.
That's a formative experience. It's a core
Yeah.
memory. Well, now Robert Irwin has taken on the mantle. I'm sure there's a lot of people having a similar experience with Robert Irwin now.
Yes. I'm actually trying to start a feud with him because I think it would help launch
You want
my
beef?
science communication career. So,
You could start a fight.
yeah, he's got an open invitation to join me on the podcast to hash it out.
Mm,
I'd like to hear his perspective, but
to set the record straight,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
to squash the beef.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, I grew up an animal nerd, and I just kind of always knew that was something that I wanted to do something related to. Every time I had a creative hobby, it always tied back somehow to like, I did photography for a while, and I did a lot of like I was kind of a wannabe wildlife photographer. And my photography was not that good. But I took a lot of pictures of animals and stuff. And what I did, drawing and illustration, I did drawings and illustrations of animals. And so like everything that I did always tied back to that. So when we were, hey, let's start a podcast for giggles. I was like, well, let's talk about animals because it's something we had kind of had this one like very playful but heated argument about who would win in a fight between an adult male grizzly bear and an adult male western lowland silverback gorilla. And so we had a lot of back and forth about that, and we realized that we were like, you know what, we could do something related to animals. So we kind of just started it for fun, figuring, hey, we'll do this for like 10 minutes and like, maybe we'll make like a few episodes, maybe like make like 6 or 7 episodes, and maybe our friends will listen to it and maybe our moms will listen to it, and it'll be a fun thing we did. And it was kind of like just a fun hobby to like try. Like, wouldn't this be a fun thing to learn how to do, like as a sort of just a thing to do together? We played a lot of Overwatch together at the time, and I was really just looking for something that we could do together that wasn't that.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, I need something. I need an out. And it went really well. We started making it, and then other people started listening to it. I still remember the first time someone like tweeted that they like had listened to our show, and it wasn't someone I knew personally. Like when a stranger like tweeted about listening to our show, I remember that being like, wow, I've made it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then that was 6 years ago, and so we've been doing it ever since.
It's really cool to see how it's grown over the past few years. Ellen, this has been really, really fascinating, and I've loved to learn about snapping turtles. I didn't know much about them before today, but I remembered I actually have half a pizza in my fridge, and I guess I don't have to say any more than that.
I
Um,
understand. Please
so
take all the time you need.
see you again, I hope. Thanks for
All
meeting me.
right. Thanks, of course. Enjoy your pizza in the fridge.
Hi everyone. I'm back in my kitchen sink. How many Celine Dion references did you catch? I only used 3 in the end, which, to be honest, makes me think I should return my gay card. Did you learn anything new about snapping turtles, the listener? I sure do hope so. If you didn't, then you must have known a lot about them already, and I'm sorry that that's an hour and a half you won't be able to get back. Perhaps you can take legal action for the wasting of your time and a lack of new snapping turtle knowledge. I'm sure there must be laws about that. Thank you, Ellen, for speaking to me about these wonderful creatures, and thanks for the public service announcement. I like to think that if I found one crossing the road now, I would know exactly how to respond. I would pick it up by the neck and put it in my car. That's the kind of knowledge you can't put a price on. I'll just pause on the erratic, incoherent babbling for one moment to thank Ellen for being so kind to me and supporting the podcast so early on. She's offered me all sorts of great advice for which I'm very grateful, and even invited me to speak on her podcast, Just the Zoo of Us, which is a pun. So you can check out that episode if you're interested. And of course, the listener. Thank you. Today was a long one, so if you're still here, then it probably means you've passed out on the sofa with your headphones in. If that's the case, sweet dreams. I hope you make it to your bed eventually. I'd like to thank Damon Macmillan for the beautiful music. I shall end now with a short poem. This one's called The Wandering Stone. Along southeastern Canada, from Halifax to Myrtle, in chilly lakes and rivers dwells the common snapping turtle. Through cracks in ice and cracks in time this ancient beast's been falling, holding out in places yet untouched by urban sprawling. For near 100 years this wizened one has waited, his icy stare the last thing seen by every fish he's baited. his side-like beak the bitter fate of each curious approacher, beneath the frozen surface of Long Lake in Nova Scotia, which is 6,000 kilometers west of the Russian village Losha. And here's a fun fact, eating turtles, like all reptiles, isn't kosher. The point being, our snapping turtle lives in a lake in Canada, and with each year to his carapace, this old boy has added a thick new layer of algae, and now he's overgrown. The perfect lake bed camouflage, for he could simply be a stone. And this old stone thinks to himself, although it's rather homely, beneath the ice, it might be nice to find somewhere less lonely. A place where there's a female, with a shell that's nice and bony, with a nice sharp beak and a long thin neck that can bend like macaroni. So off he heads to find himself a brand new destination. And taking a deep breath via cloacal respiration, he heads up to the surface, on the hunt now for a hole up in the ice, that is. Reaching fresh air is his goal. He finds one, led above by shining rays of winter sun. He surfaces, crawls onto land, and with that his quest's begun. Facing north by virtue of a feeling that's innate, he sets out to explore the land and to find himself a mate. But as he wanders clumsily, his land-based movement rather slowed. In search of a new residence in a different postal code, he finds himself at risk of being mercilessly mowed, for he has blundered to the middle of a very busy road. His eyes are filled with floodlights, and a screeching fills his ears. And as the car approaches, he reflects upon his years. His life flashes before him. He remembers being an egg. He remembers breaking out his shell, and he remembers his first leg of life then as a hatchling. So perilous it seemed. Every hungry bird or otter to him a terrifying fiend. He remembers his first mate, and he remembers becoming a father. He thinks back upon a century, and now he thinks he'd rather have remained within his frozen pond, for it seems at last he's come to the final fiend that he will face, a thing he can't outrun. But as he makes his peace with this, and as he calms his mind, he feels a pair of human hands gently lift him from behind. Their warm touch moves him forward in the direction he was going, and after he's placed down, the blinding lights start softly glowing, and as they fade off into the distance, and he's far away from traffic, he's avoided an untimely end which would have been quite graphic. He's able to continue his search for love through the unknown, and when he spots a nice new pond, he notices a stone, and towards the stone he makes an enthusiastic hurtle, for the big green stone he sees, in fact, is a female snapping turtle, and the female lets him know that he is welcome in her pond, and that she likes his carapace, and of his bendy neck she's fond. He tells her that to find her, he's travelled from afar, and with that, the pair then hunker down, far away from any car.